Welcome to Under Baobab Skies. The wind moves slowly tonight, dragging the scent of wet earth across an ancient courtyard. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls like a deep drum, and an elder's voice begins to hum a story the air already knows. This is a place where legends breathe, where the past isn't just remembered. It's felt in the shiver of the leaves and the rumble of an approaching storm. Tonight, we journey back to the heart of the old Oyo Empire, to a time when the sky itself held court. They say, once, a man challenged the heavens, and the heavens answered. He was not a god when he began, only a king with lightning in his eyes and ambition burning in his heart. But by the time his name was whispered in villages from the coast to the savannah, he was no longer just a man. He had become the sound of thunder, the flash of rage, the fire that refused to die. His name was Sango, the fourth Olofin of Oyo, the Lord of Storms. And those who swore to follow him, long after his mortal body fell, became the keepers of his eternal fire. They were the Sango priests' oracles of thunder, wielders of the double-headed axe, and guardians of a terrifying brand of justice. The stories say Sango could see through the clouds, that lightning was his tongue and thunder his laughter. But what the world often forgets is that even the laughter of a king can sound like a declaration of war. And what happens when mere mortals are tasked with channeling that divine, volatile power under the great, sheltering branches of the Baobab? We begin our story not with gods, but with men. Ordinary men who learned to speak with thunder. Men who carried sacred calabashes filled with storm water and whispered prayers that bent the very air around them. Men whose hearts trembled on a fine line between absolute worship and spiraling madness. To be chosen by Sango was the highest honor, a mark of divine favor. But, as many came to learn, it was also a sentence. A life tethered to the whims of the storm. In the heart of Oyo, centuries ago, thunder was not just weather, it was judgment. When the sky cracked open with a blinding flash, mothers would pull their children close, covering their ears, and the royal drummers would silence their beats. Every bolt of lightning was a verdict, a message from the dead king who refused to rest in peace. His priests, the Mugba Sango, stood in that deafening silence, their faces painted in sacred white chalk, their eyes fixed on the turbulent sky. They were the interpreters of the storm. If thunder rolled thrice, it meant a liar had been exposed. If it rolled just once, a deep, satisfying rumble, it meant Sango was content. The priests held the power to declare a person struck by lightning as a thief or an adulterer, their death a divine punishment. No one dared question the verdict of the storm. The family of the accused would have to pay a heavy fine to the priests to appease the god and reclaim the body for burial. This was their authority, absolute and fearsome. But the truth, much like lightning, never strikes the same place twice. And in time, even the most devout priests learned to fear their own voices. They learned that when you summon thunder, it remembers exactly who called it. Some historians and scholars say Sango's priests were the first to truly understand energy, that invisible, powerful force that arcs between the sky and the earth. They knew how to harness it through rhythm, through specific chants, and through carefully prepared sacrifices. They called this power *Asing, the divine authority to make things happen, to speak and have the world obey. With it, they could judge kings, heal the sick, and lay curses upon the unfaithful. Their power came not from physical muscle, but from vibration, from the perfect alignment of sound and storm moving as one terrifying, beautiful force. Yet, what makes a god's servant pure is not his ceremonial robe or his powerful incantations, but his restraint. And in the quiet, turbulent years that followed Oyo's golden age, As internal strife and external pressures began to fray the edges of the empire, that restraint began to fade. Some priests found a dark joy in the fear they commanded. Others saw the thunder as a form of currency, a tool for extortion. The sacred fire of Sango, once a symbol of justice and divine order, began to burn the very people it was meant to protect. The line between divine will and human greed became blurred, lost in the roar of the storm. That is the story we'll tell tonight. Not the polished legend of a god king, but the raw, human confessions of those who carried his thunder for far too long. It is a story about power, corruption, and the intoxicating burden of speaking for a god. By the time you drift into sleep, you'll see how lightning can both cleanse and consume. How the same fire that forges a crown can also melt it down to nothing. And you will understand why the loudest, most dangerous power is often the one that is only whispered, not shouted. The storm is here, and the story begins now. Thank you for joining us. If you feel the pull of these ancient stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a journey into the past. You are now under Baobab skies, and the story begins now. Alright, let's dive deep into a story that turns myth into reality. A tale of power, passion, and the very elements themselves. By the end of this part, you'll understand exactly how a mortal king's burning temper transformed into the very thunder of a god. Get ready, because this is going to be epic. Before he ever became the thunder we know, Sango was a man, a fierce, tall figure whose eyes, they say, could practically set oil aflame with a single glance. He ruled the ancient city of Oyo, not with the gentle hand of patience, but with a searing heat, a relentless fire that burned within him. The ancient storytellers, the griots, whispered tales that he could summon lightning right from his outstretched hands, and that when his mighty axe struck against stone, sparks would dance and leap like liberated spirits. Now, whether those specific details are literally true or simply a testament to his awe-inspiring presence, one thing was absolutely certain. Wherever Sango walked, storms, both literal and metaphorical, inevitably followed in his wake. He was a force of nature even before he became one. Now, imagine a world where order was paramount. Sango was born into a society that deeply prized structure and tradition. In those times, the Olafin, the king, wasn't just a political leader. He was also a revered priest, someone chosen by the gods themselves, yet always subject to the careful judgment of the wise council of elders. But Sango, he was no ordinary ruler. He possessed a boundless ambition, believing that the crown of Oyo was far too small, too mundane for his grand vision. He yearned for a crown that reached beyond the earthly. He wanted the crown of the heavens to, and so, driven by this insatiable desire for power and control, he began to experiment, not just with earthly weapons, but with fire itself, with molten iron, and with powerful, twisting words that could literally bend the wind to his will. You can almost see him, a young, powerful figure amidst the bustling streets of the early Oyo Empire. Markets teeming with life, smoke rising, and music filling the air. Perhaps you can even picture him as a young man, training with heavy iron weapons under a sky that already seemed to rumble with a distant thundercloud. And then, the first signs of his growing power, villagers gazing upwards, their faces a mixture of fear and wonder, as a bolt of lightning flashes dramatically behind the royal palace. His first true miracle, though, wasn't divine at all in the traditional sense, it was purely chemical. Sango, with a brilliant and perhaps dangerous mind, learned to meticulously mix potent powders that would flash with blinding light and roar with an explosive sound. These concoctions were enough to send fear into the hearts of his enemies and absolutely dazzle his entire court. What started as clever illusion, however, very quickly morphed into something far more profound: faith. People began to whisper, their voices hushed and reverent, that their king, Sango, could genuinely summon storms at will. When thunder rumbled across the sky, they would instinctively bow their heads, utterly convinced that the heavens themselves were applauding their powerful ruler. Power, once tasted, is a hungry beast. It always demands more, and Sango was no exception. He began to see himself not just as a king, but as the storm's true equal, a living embodiment of its raw force. He spoke less and less to mere men, turning his pronouncements more often to the swirling winds, as if they were his confidants. He even declared that no one, absolutely no one, should dare to build a fire without first invoking his powerful name. Even his most battle-hardened generals found themselves trembling when he unleashed one of his booming laughs, for they could never discern if it was simply a moment of mirth or a dire, chilling warning of what was to come. Then, tragically, came the inevitable. A day when his boundless fury tragically outpaced his already dwindling reason. Sango, now utterly drunk with his own pride and power, decided to perform a grand storm ritual right in front of his people, a display of his ultimate control. But the very winds he so arrogantly called forth did not obey. Instead, a terrifying bolt of lightning struck his magnificent palace, unleashing chaos and devastation. The fire raged, consuming everything in its path, tragically killing his beloved wives, his loyal soldiers, and even innocent children caught in the inferno. The entire city burned, a tragic testament to his unchecked ambition. And as the thick smoke billowed skyward, the people's once unwavering worship curdled into abject terror. They said, those who survived, that he simply walked into the heart of those raging flames and vanished. A chilling, echoing laugh supposedly cracking through the air as thunder rumbled ominously above the smoldering ruins. Some, grief-stricken, believed he had truly died in the inferno. Others, however, swore that the very earth itself, perhaps in defiance or reverence, simply refused to hold his immense spirit. But from that day forward, every single time the sky broke open with a mighty roar, people would whisper, their voices hushed with a mixture of fear and reverence. Sango has spoken. You can almost visualize the scene, the palace burning, flames licking at the sky as lightning flashes across the distant horizon. And then, a figure, perhaps almost ghostly, disappearing into the churning storm clouds, leaving behind a city in ashes, where red-robed priests now kneel amongst the debris, a new era dawning. From that pivotal day, thunder was no longer just mere weather in Oyo. It became a living, breathing presence. Children grew up instinctively fearing to curse or speak ill near the rain, knowing Sango was listening. Women, hoping for safe deliveries, prayed earnestly to Sango before childbirth. Men, preparing for battle, invoked his name for strength and victory. The storm was now their collective conscience, a powerful, ever-present reminder of a king who became a god. And the priests, his priests, rose to power, becoming the sole interpreters of this living, thundering judgment. The king, in his mortal form, was gone, but his voice, mighty and unforgettable, now lived forever in the clouds, and his devoted followers vowed, with every fiber of their being, to never, ever let that powerful voice fall silent again. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a world shrouded in storm clouds and ancient power, exploring the fascinating and intense lives of Sango's priests. Forget what you think you know about lightning. These aren't just weather watchers, they're chosen conduits of the sky's fury and wisdom. This isn't just a story. It's an immersion into a tradition where the very air crackles with divine energy. Imagine this, an elder walking through a village as rain pours down, not seeking shelter, but seeking a heartbeat. A child trembles, not from cold, but from an almost electric connection to the storm. A flicker in their eye, a subtle shiver in their hand. These tiny, almost imperceptible signs are the universe marking a child for a destiny intertwined with the sky itself. They weren't born into thunder. They were chosen by it. From that moment, their life changes forever. The chosen boy or girl is led away to the palace, a place where drums beat a constant rhythm, a pulse that vibrates through the very ground. The air there isn't just humid. It's thick with the scent of smoke and iron, a metallic temps that speaks of power and transformation. It's here, in these secluded training grounds at Oyo, under perpetually overcast skies, that these young novices, clad in ceremonial robes, begin their extraordinary journey. By the end of their very first year, these young priests have already learned to dance with lightning. They don't just see the storm. They feel it, smell it, they know the rhythm of lightning, how its arrival can be anticipated by the metallic scent of ozone hanging in the air, a whisper carried on the wind just before the world erupts. They learn that every storm, much like every human, possesses its own unique temper. Some are swift and unforgiving, others slow and brooding. Misreading the storm isn't just a mistake. It's a profound transgression, capable of bringing punishment as swiftly as it would to a disobedient villager. It's a life lived on the edge of a divine blade. And so, every single day, their voices rise in unison. A sacred chant echoing through the training yard. "O Sango, teach us your voice, your step, your hand." It's a plea, a meditation, a surrender to the immense force they serve. The instruments of their power are surprisingly humble, yet exquisitely precise. Take the small, double-headed axe, for instance. It's not just a tool. It's a symbol, polished meticulously until it gleams like sunlight dancing on water, a potent emblem of their authority. Then there are the calabashes, not just decorative gourds, but vessels filled with sacred storm water collected from ancient ponds. These are carried with reverence in processions, their contents reflecting the very storm clouds they seek to understand. And around their necks, wrists, and waists, strings of iron beads and cowries, each one a marker of rank, of achievement, a silent testament to years of dedication and understanding. All of these objects, seemingly simple, form a complex language, a communication understood only by those who have spent countless hours listening, truly listening, to the thunder itself. Imagine the focus, the silent understanding as young priests balance these polished axes on their shoulders, moving in perfect formation, their footsteps heavy in the mud during a torrential downpour, a ceremony unfolding amidst the raw power of nature. Initiation isn't just a ceremony. It's a trial by fire, a crucible that forges the weak into the strong. The young priest must stand barefoot on scorching stones, the ground hot beneath their feet, as the sky above rumbles with Sango's power. Lightning doesn't just flash in the distance. It strikes close, close enough for them to feel its raw heat on their skin, a searing embrace of divine energy. One misstep, one faltering prayer, even a moment of doubt, and the novice is cast out, marked forever as unworthy, unable to bridge the gap between man and sky. Only those who can endure both the profound fear and the intense physical pain emerge victorious, becoming the vital mediators between the human world and the powerful realm of the sky god. The older priests, those who have walked this path for decades, impart wisdom through silence. Hours are spent in quiet contemplation, watching the horizon, patiently observing the slow, deliberate growth of clouds, understanding that patience is a virtue when dealing with the divine. Thunder, they would say, their voices, deep with experience, is not ours to command. It is ours to respect. And here lies the sharp irony, a god of storms, whose power is absolute, yet serves men who, in their hubris, might sometimes forget the fundamental lesson of humility. The most dangerous among them were not the weak, but those who loved the roar of the storm too much, who twisted its power, whispering curses instead of sacred prayers, their eyes sparkling with dangerous ambition rather than genuine reverence. Let's just pause for a moment here. Can you feel it? The fire crackles gently, a comforting sound as the night breathes around us. You can almost hear the low, rhythmic hum of distant drums carried on the wind, a heartbeat across the landscape. The priests are walking barefoot, the earth soft and muddy beneath their soles. The rich, earthy smell of wet soil rising in spirals around them. This is more than just a history lesson. It's a journey into their world. Over time, these priests formed a complex hierarchy, each rank representing a deeper, more profound conduit to Sango's immense power. The novices learned to read intricate patterns in the clouds, to decipher the exact meaning behind every flash of lightning. They discovered that thunder itself had dialects, some rolling like distant, ancient drums echoing through valleys, while others were sharp and sudden, like the strike of a perfectly aimed axe. A misread pattern wasn't just a minor error. It could lead to devastating consequences, famine, severe punishment, or even death. It was a sacred language written in the very sky, and only the trained ear, the dedicated heart, could truly translate its profound messages. Imagine them kneeling on a hill, pointing to the sky, their expertise honed over years, as a single axe gleams in the faint, flickering light of distant lightning, held high in ritual. Meanwhile, in the long shot, the village below lies beneath a brewing storm. Its inhabitants, watching from a distance, understanding that their fate rests in the hands of these skilled interpreters. The lives of these priests were a constant, delicate balance between profound devotion and immense terror. They married late in life, if at all, their commitments lying elsewhere. They ate simple, unadorned meals, sustaining themselves without extravagance. And they slept on woven mats near sacred shrines, always listening. The thunder, you see, never truly left them. Even after a storm had passed, the priests could feel its lingering residue in the very air, a faint hum that resonated deep within their veins. This constant, unbreakable connection with Sango's powerful voice was both an extraordinary gift and an immense burden, a weight heavier than any physical object. Some priests became revered, even feared, for their uncanny ability to call judgment. Villagers would whisper tales of mysterious acts done in secret crops, mysteriously failing, misdeeds punished without a visible hand. It was the priests, they would say, their voices hushed, who delivered vengeance through the storm. The line between divine justice and profound fear blurred, becoming indistinguishable. These priests had learned the ultimate, profound lesson. To wield thunder is to wield a responsibility far heavier than iron itself, a power that shapes lives and landscapes. And still, through generations, the novices continue their chants, their voices rising with unwavering devotion. The elders, with their watchful, knowing eyes, continue to guide. Each ritual, each deliberate step, each softly whispered prayer reinforces that sacred, unbreakable bond between man and the boundless sky. It is not a life for the faint of heart, for those who seek comfort and ease. It is a life for those who possess the rare ability to hear the sky speak, to understand its raw power, and to answer its call without a moment of hesitation. What an incredible legacy, woven into the very fabric of nature. We're now diving deep into a world where power isn't just held, it's felt, a world where the sky itself is both a divine force and a constant reminder of the weight of responsibility. We're talking about the incredible priests of Sango, a journey that begins not in a temple, but in the searing heat of a lightning strike. Imagine that first jolt, not as an attack, but as a calling, a brutal initiation that teaches you immediately that every flash of thunder has consequences, and a single misstep could summon death itself. From that moment on, these priests carried a profound knowledge. Even the most revered among them trembled before the sky, because, for them, respect wasn't just a virtue. It was survival, and fear that was wisdom. For the high-ranking priests, daily life was a meticulously choreographed dance. Picture them moving through ancient villages, their presence commanding a silent authority. Their double-headed axes, symbols of both creation and destruction, glinted under both sun and storm, a constant visual reminder of their dual role. Villagers approached them with a mix of awe and deep caution, understanding that these weren't just spiritual leaders. They were the guardians of life and the instruments of divine justice. Every single word they spoke, every gesture they made, was weighed against the immense expectations of Sango, the god of thunder, lightning, and fire. A glance that was too harsh, a prayer that felt too short. These weren't minor infractions. They could potentially summon the wrath of the heavens upon an entire homestead, devastating crops, homes, and lives. The stakes, as you can imagine, were unbelievably high. But it wasn't just in their public duties that this vigilance was paramount. Even in the quietest moments, a profound sense of apprehension lingered. Nighttime, for instance, wasn't a time for peaceful slumber. For these priests, the distant rumble of thunder served as both a strange lullaby and an ominous warning. They slept lightly, always, their senses tuned to the slightest crack in the sky, a sound that could herald a message, or perhaps a direct warning from above. Their dreams were vivid, often prophetic, filled with the raw elements of their deity: fire, torrential water, and the sharp, metallic smell of burning iron. It was a life where true rest was an elusive luxury, because vigilance, a constant, unwavering vigilance, was demanded around the clock, year after year. This intense training began early, and it never truly ceased. High priests weren't just teaching theology, they were demonstrating raw power. Imagine this: small bolts of lightning, carefully trapped within ritual objects, used to teach control and restraint to young novices. Mistakes, when they happened, weren't met with simple scolding. They were corrected immediately, not just with a firm hand, but with the terrifying, ever-present reminder of Sango's omnipresence. An elder, his eyes holding the wisdom of countless storms, would often utter a chilling truth. "Do not forget," he'd say, his voice low and resonant. "The storm chooses neither king nor priest. It chooses what it will." It was a lesson designed to instill humility, not just fear, ensuring that no one ever forgot who held the ultimate power. As priests advanced through their ranks, the rituals they performed grew ever more complex, more intricate. Sacred chants, echoing through the air, intertwined with the deep, resonant thrum of percussion. This wasn't just music. It was a rhythm designed to summon, to honor, or even to redirect the storm itself. Each ceremony was a delicate negotiation, a subtle dance between deep humility and undeniable spiritual authority. Power was never, ever flaunted. Instead, it was held lightly, almost like the gentle touch of the wind on a spear. The entire community, their very existence, depended on this precise, fragile balance. A blessing misused, a ritual performed incorrectly, could devastate not just individual lives, but entire harvests, entire herds of livestock, throwing the delicate ecosystem of their world into chaos. And yet, despite these immense dangers, despite the constant threat of divine retribution, some priests, as is often the case with human nature, began to seek more. Ambition, a quiet, insidious force, crept into their hearts, often hidden beneath calm faces and steady, practiced hands. Those who hungered for greater recognition, those who yearned for more personal power, risked overstepping those sacred, invisible, divine boundaries. Lightning, they quickly learned, does not forgive hubris. It strikes without mercy, a swift and brutal lesson. Many who attempted to bend the storm to their personal will learned this truth in the bitterest possible way. Their stories serving as stark warnings whispered in the night. Let's pause for a moment, friends. Imagine you're right there with them, the fire crackling gently as the night breathes round us. The rich, earthy smell of wet soil mingles with the exotic scent of incense and the smoke from distant ritual fires. A deep, resonant drumbeat echoes in the distance, a primal sound that carries both ancient warnings and timeless stories, tales of triumph and terrifying consequences alike. Even the most seasoned, most powerful priests among them maintained a profound sense of humility, a constant awareness of their place in the grand scheme of things. They never forgot the novices who had faltered, whose ambition had led to their undoing. They remembered the chilling whispers of villagers who had vanished, mysteriously taken by the very forces the priests sought to mediate. And they never, ever forgot the sudden, devastating lightning strikes that had been misinterpreted, leading to unintended and tragic consequences. Life, they understood deeply, was always balanced on a razor's edge. So they moved, they spoke, and they acted with an almost unbearable care, acutely aware that every single choice they made, every breath they took, was part of an ongoing, sacred dialogue with the sky itself. The fear of lightning, for these priests, was not a weakness. Far from it. It was, in its purest form, respect. The high priests demonstrated their profound mastery not by trying to conquer the storm, for how can one conquer the divine? Instead, they mastered it by listening to it, by letting it guide them, by becoming channels for its immense power. Through decades of relentless practice, through countless rituals and silent meditations, they learned to predict the flash before the crack, to feel the subtle, almost imperceptible movement of thunder as it rolled across the land. It evolved into a silent, deeply intimate conversation between the mortal and the divine. A rhythm known only to those who had devoted their entire lives, their very souls, to In the end, the life of a thunder priest was a profound paradox. Terrifying yet utterly enlightening, restrictive yet deeply liberating. To be chosen as a vessel of such immense divine power was to bear a responsibility heavier than any stone, a weight that shaped every fiber of their being. They were feared, yes, and profoundly revered. Yet they remained intimately human men and women who, even as they commanded awe and respect, still trembled before the raw, untamed forces they served. Their enduring legacy would live on, not just in the crashing storms or the ancient chants, but in the countless stories whispered under the sheltering branches of the Baobab trees, long after the priests themselves had passed into legend. By walking this incredibly demanding path, by shouldering this immense burden, these priests ensured that the power of Sango remained sacred, forever feared, and eternally respected. The burden of thunder, though undeniably heavy, didn't break them. Instead, it forged and shaped the very soul of oil, the land they protected. And for those who listened closely, for those who truly understood, the story of these incredible priests was not one of simple terror, but a profound testament to discipline, unwavering devotion, and the deep, unbreakable bond between the earth and the sky. We're diving into a story shrouded in ancient power, a tale where the very sky held the ultimate judgment. Imagine a time and place where the rumble of thunder wasn't just a weather phenomenon, but the very voice of truth itself. That place was Oyo. In Oyo, the air itself seemed to hum with a palpable tension, a heaviness that only the brewing thunder could truly explain. When those dark clouds began to roll in from the west, a hush would fall over the bustling markets and quiet villages. People would whisper, a collective murmur passing through the crowd. Sango is watching again. For them, lightning wasn't merely electricity dancing across the sky. It was the ultimate arbiter, the raw, undeniable voice of truth. Standing majestically at the very heart of the capital was the Temple of Judgment. Its imposing clay walls, darkened and gleaming with the soot and oil of countless ceremonies, seemed to absorb the very essence of the land. Every intricate carving etched into its ancient facade, every spear planted firmly in the ground outside its entrance, served as a stark, powerful reminder to all who lived within Oyo's reach. No one, absolutely no one, could lie before the thunder and expect to survive. This was the law, etched not just in stone, but in the very fabric of their belief system. It was a terrifying, yet strangely comforting, pillar of their society. Now, picture this scene. It's a day of trial, a day when destinies hang in the balance. We see a wide, sweeping shot, perhaps from CapCut, of Oyo's grand, bustling market, slowly, almost magically, fading into the awe-inspiring presence of that colossal clay shrine. Torches flicker rhythmically, casting dancing shadows as villagers, dressed in their most vibrant, colorful cloths, gather in hushed anticipation under a sky that's rapidly darkening, heavy with storm clouds. The very atmosphere is electric, charged with unspoken fears and hopes. On these fateful days, the accused would stand barefoot before the shrine, vulnerable and exposed. The priests of Sango, figures of immense power and reverence, would be there. These weren't just any men. They were wrapped in rich crimson cloth, their bodies adorned with strands of white beads, their faces often painted with symbolic designs. They would begin their sacred chants, verses that didn't just speak, but curled through the heavy air like tendrils of smoke, weaving an ancient spell. The accused, their hearts pounding against their ribs, would raise their hands, swear their innocence before the gods and all present, and pray with every fiber of their being that the sky would remain utterly silent. Because here's the terrifying truth. If lightning struck, if that brilliant, searing bolt tore through the sky, the verdict was clear, undeniable, and absolute. Guilty. There was no appeal, no second chance. It was Sango's direct pronouncement. And if, immediately after a plea was made, a deep, resonating thunder rolled through the heavens, the people, with a collective sigh of acceptance, would bow their heads. For in Oyo, justice didn't wear the somber black robes we might recognize. Here, justice wore only the majestic, unpredictable, and often terrifying robes of the storm clouds themselves. It was a system built on fear, respect, and an unwavering belief in divine intervention. But here's where the story takes a darker, more complex turn. Truth, as they say, can be a dangerous god. In Oyo, it wasn't always as simple as divine intervention. Not every storm that gathered over the capital was truly divine. And certainly, not every lightning bolt that struck came directly from the heavens as an act of Sango. There were nights, quiet, shadowy nights, when the revered priests of Sango themselves would whisper amongst one another, their voices low and conspiratorial. They began to manipulate the very timing of these sacred verdicts, using hidden fires to create deceptive smoke signals and hollow drums to mimic the distant rumble of thunder. To the common man, watching from below, terrified yet awed, it sounded precisely like Sango's fearsome roar, an undeniable declaration from the heavens. But to the truly guilty, or perhaps even the tragically unlucky, caught in this intricate web of deceit, it was the chilling, final sound of their life abruptly ending. The power they wielded, originally meant to uphold justice, was slowly being corrupted, twisted into something far more sinister. We see a CapCut prompt here, a priest, standing tall and imposing, raising a sacred axe towards a boiling, tempestuous sky. His figure silhouetted against the tumultuous heavens. Villagers below hold their breath, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and devotion, as the faint, ominous echo of thunder rolls in the distance. The tension is palpable, almost suffocating. Yet, despite this growing undercurrent of manipulation, faith remained an incredibly powerful, almost blinding force for the people of Oyo. They were so deeply rooted in their belief that they simply could not, or perhaps would not, question the actions of the priests. After all, who among them would dare to challenge thunder itself? Who would stand against the very voice of Sango? And so, fear, a quiet, insidious fear, slowly but surely became law. The thunder, once a symbol of pure, unadulterated justice, morphed into the ultimate, unchallengeable judge, its pronouncements final and absolute. The temple itself, once a symbol of divine order, began to carry a heavy scent, a chilling mix of blood and rain, clinging to its ancient clay walls. After the storms passed, leaving behind a world cleansed and steaming, the priests would perform their ritualistic purification. They would wash their hands, not in ordinary water, but in bowls filled with lightning water, rain meticulously collected during the very trials themselves. They proclaimed that this water held purifying power, that it could cleanse the soul and miraculously erase all lies from the tongue of anyone who touched it. It was a powerful, symbolic act, reinforcing their authority and their connection to the divine. But even something as seemingly pure as this ritual could, in time, become a weapon. It wasn't long before the powerful noble families, those with influence and wealth, began to subtly, then overtly, bribe the priests. They would ask, often with veiled threats and promises of riches, that thunder speak softly on their behalf, or perhaps even remain completely silent when their own family members or allies stood accused. Conversely, others paid handsomely for thunder to roar with unprecedented fury against their rivals, hoping to bring about their downfall through divine judgment. The sacred shrine of Sango, once a place of impartial truth, slowly but undeniably transformed into a courtroom of clouds. Here, truth itself could be bought with enough coin and silence that precious commodity could be sold to the highest bidder. We can imagine a powerful CapCut close-up here, gleaming coins and shimmering cowries, symbols of wealth, dropping one by one into a priest's waiting, outstretched bowl. In the background, lightning flashes ominously behind a intricately carved Sango statue, as the manipulated, soft rumble of thunder rolls, sealing a purchased fate. And yet, for all its creeping fear, for all its undeniable corruption, the temple of Sango remained, astonishingly, the very heartbeat of Oyo. The people continued to believe, not because they were foolish, but because belief itself gave structure to their often chaotic lives. It provided an order, a sense of meaning that they desperately craved. They needed the thunder, They needed Sango's voice, even if, deep down, a part of them suspected that sometimes, just sometimes, it might lie. It was a testament to the enduring human need for meaning, for justice, even if that justice was imperfect and sometimes tragically manipulated. It's a fascinating, complex story about power, faith, and the very nature of truth itself. All right, let's dive into the fascinating world of ancient prophecy and power. You know, when the world was much younger and the line between man and God felt a whole lot thinner, there were those who walked right on that edge. We're talking about the priests of Sango, the mighty Orisha of thunder and lightning. These weren't just spiritual leaders, they were judges, advisors, and yes, even prophets. Imagine a time when the very fate of a community, wars, marriages, the success of the harvest could hinge on a dream. That was their reality. These priests weren't just respected, they were feared, loved, and in a profound way, utterly alone. They held immense power, yet bore an unimaginable burden. The stories say that the greatest among them could actually hear Sango's voice in their sleep. Can you imagine? A low, resonant hum that vibrated through their very bones, like a drumbeat. It must have been an awe-inspiring, terrifying experience. But living in that space, between the tangible world of men and the ethereal realm of gods, takes its toll. It's a weight no human heart is truly built to carry forever. The more these priests listened, the more their minds, their very sanity, began to fray like old, well-worn cloth. It's a stark reminder that even the most sacred callings come with a cost. Now, among these powerful seers, one priest stood out, Adayinka, famously known as the mouth of the storm. Adayinka rose to prominence, not just for hearing whispers, but for shouting prophecies that shook kingdoms. His most famous prediction, a royal coup, before anyone even whispered such a thing in the shadows. And when it came to pass, exactly as he foretold, the effect was monumental. The Olafin himself, the king, came to bow before Adayinka, showering the sacred shrine with gifts not just gold dust, but precious livestock, all symbols of immense wealth and respect. It was a testament to Adayinka's power, and it changed everything. Because here's the thing about power and prophecy. Gold is often louder than thunder. The dazzling allure of wealth and influence began to eclipse the pure search for truth. Soon, others weren't just seeking Adayinka's guidance for the good of the kingdom or for clarity in uncertain times. They came for favor, for personal gain, for power dressed up in the guise of prophecy. The purity of the divine message began to warp under the weight of human ambition. Capcut prompt, a priest pacing nervously under heavy dark clouds. His face, etched with a mix of wisdom and anxiety, is lit only by the flickering glow of a single candlelight. Around him, worshippers kneel, their faces upturned in hope, while the shrine itself practically groans under the weight of offerings, ivory, shimmering fabrics, piles of cowries. It's a visual testament to the immense pressure and expectations placed upon these spiritual intermediaries. The shift was subtle at first, then became a tidal wave. Some priests, seeing the influx of gifts and the hunger for specific outcomes, started to manufacture visions. They'd accept lavish gifts in exchange for convenient good omens, telling people exactly what they wanted to hear, rather than what Sango might truly be saying. Others, in a desperate attempt to truly connect, began extreme practices. They would starve themselves, push their bodies to the brink, believing that deprivation would somehow sharpen their spiritual hearing. But often, it only led to exhaustion and hallucinations, seeing storms that weren't there, hearing echoes that were merely the cries of their own dwindling minds. One by one, their spirits, their very minds, began to crack open like dry gourds under the relentless sun. The line between divine insight and self-delusion blurred completely. You see, to serve Sango was to live a life on the razor's edge, to dance between glory and absolute ruin. It was like walking barefoot through a lightning storm, never knowing if the next flash would incinerate you or elevate you to something transcendent. The stakes were incredibly high, and the personal cost often was everything. As the priest's integrity waned, the shrine, ironically, overflowed with material wealth. Piles of gleaming ivory, countless cowries, and fine cloths from distant coasts adorned every surface. Yet, as the physical riches grew, peace within the priestly order became incredibly scarce. Rivalries erupted. Priests began to accuse each other of blasphemy, of false prophecies, of abusing their sacred trust. The once unified front began to splinter. Some, perhaps genuinely overwhelmed or escaping the encroaching corruption, vanished into the dense forests, claiming the god had called them away to a purer path. Others met a far darker end, found dead near riverbanks, their eyes wide open, forever staring, as if they had glimpsed the afterlife for perhaps the terrifying truth of their own downfall. Despite all this turmoil, the people kept coming. They continued to flock to the temple, their hope and desperation unwavering. Why? Because prophecy, even potentially tainted prophecy, was the closest thing to control they had in a world constantly at the mercy of storms both literal and metaphorical. They needed to know. They desperately needed to know if their children would survive the lean seasons, if their crops would yield enough to feed their families, if their enemies would triumph or fall. In a world full of uncertainty, even a glimmer of foreknowledge, real or imagined, was a lifeline. Cap-cut prompt, distant lightning cracks across the vast savanna, illuminating the horizon in fleeting flashes. In the foreground, within the temple walls, priests are locked in fierce debate, their faces contorted with anger and suspicion, lit only by the sputtering flames of torches. And then, slowly, steadily, the first drops of rain begin to fall, mirroring the internal tempest brewing among them. And so, the sacred temple, once a beacon of pure divine connection, slowly but surely transformed into a theater. The priests, once humble servants of the divine, became actors in an elaborate high-stakes drama. The thunder of Sango, once a voice of prophecy, became nothing more than applause for a performance. In this twisted reality, no one, not even the priests themselves, truly knew which omens were real anymore. All that mattered was that the play had to continue. Because if the curtain fell, if the belief in prophecy crumbled, then the very faith of an entire kingdom, its structure, its hope, would collapse into chaos. It's a powerful story, isn't it? A vivid reminder of the fine line between faith and exploitation, and how even the most sacred institutions can be corrupted by human desires. All right, let's dive into the next chapter of our story, where silence becomes the loudest sound. Then came the silence. After Sango's fury, an eerie calm settled over the land. Months stretched on, and not a single storm graced the skies. The vibrant blue faded to a pale, washed-out canvas, and the life-giving rivers, once abundant, began to shrink, turning into dusty cracks in the earth. Even the very concept of thunder seemed to vanish, forgotten by the heavens. It was as if the world held its breath, waiting. At first, the people of Oyo reacted with a familiar patience. "Sango is resting," they whispered, nodding to each other, reassuring themselves. They believed their powerful god simply needed a moment of respite after his great display. But as the relentless grip of drought tightened its hold, that patience began to fray, slowly giving way to a chilling, primal fear. The lush fields, once heavy with crops, shriveled and died under the unforgiving sun. Markets, usually bustling with vibrant trade and laughter, emptied out, echoing with a hollow emptiness. The joyful rhythm of daily life was replaced by a new, gnawing sound, the ever-present grumble of hunger, growing louder with each passing day. The land was changing, and not for the better. The priests, who had once stood tall and confident, now trembled before the silent sky. Fear was a cold hand clutching at their hearts. How could Sango, the mighty god of thunder and lightning, go mute? Had they somehow angered him beyond measure with their greed, their earthly failings? Or worse, had the false prophecies, those whispers of power and glory without true devotion, somehow reached Sangos' divine ears, offending him deeply? They looked to the heavens, desperate for a sign, for any indication that their god was still listening, still watching over them. But there was nothing, only the vast, indifferent expanse of a cloudless sky. The fear in their hearts soon morphed into something more desperate: deception. The senior priests, in a frantic attempt to appease the increasingly anxious populace, began staging fake miracles. Under the cloak of night, they would hide powder in clay pots, igniting it to create sudden, startling flashes of fire, hoping to mimic Sango's lightning. Sango has spoken again, they would declare, their voices filled with forced conviction, trying to calm the growing unrest. The drought will end soon. Have faith, but lies, no matter how well-intended, cannot summon rain. Weeks turned into months, and with no real thunder echoing across the plains, the people's faith, once as solid as rock, began to rot like old fruit, sour and putrid. The trust between the people and their spiritual guides shattered. The markets, once overflowing with offerings of yams and goat meat brought reverently to the shrines, now buzzed with angry whispers and harsh curses directed at the priests. Families, once devout, stopped their pilgrimages and withheld their precious sacrifices. Children, usually respectful, now openly mocked the priests in the streets, their innocent voices carrying a painful sting. Where is your thunder now? The pressure became unbearable. Some priests, unable to face the disappointment and anger of their people, fled Oyo, seeking refuge in exile. Others, perhaps hoping for Sango's forgiveness, or simply too broken to move, stayed behind, enduring the scorn. One night, during a fierce dust storm, a lone priest, his face streaked with tears and dust, climbed to the very top of the shrine roof. He raised his arms to the swirling, empty sky, his voice raw with anguish. "Speak to me, Father of Fire," he screamed into the gale. "Strike me if I have sinned." The sky remained silent, indifferent to his plea. He collapsed to his knees, his body racked with sobs. That silence, that profound, deafening silence, was louder and more devastating than any thunderclap Sango had ever unleashed. It tore through the city's proud spirit, through the very heart of the Olafin, the king, and through every single believer who had once gazed up with unwavering faith. In that hollow, echoing silence, the once mighty empire of Oyo began to fracture, piece by painful piece. From that parched, dusty land, under an endless, silent sky, the people of Oyo learned an ancient, profound truth. They realized that day that even gods, no matter how powerful or revered, can fall silent. And when they do, it is left to mortals, to us, to decide whether to listen even harder, trying to decipher a hidden message in the void, or perhaps, finally, to start thinking for ourselves, to find our own paths forward without divine guidance. All right, let's dive into the fascinating world of the Oyo Empire and its thunderous deity, Sango. This is going to be an epic journey. Asterisk, asterisk, the Oyo Empire. We've talked about its rise, its warriors, and its incredible culture. But there is a unique aspect of Oyo life that truly shaped its expansion and its people, the thunderous reach of its gods. Specifically, we're talking about Sango, the deity of thunder, lightning, justice, and dance. A figure whose presence wasn't just in the spiritual realm, but deeply woven into the very fabric of Oyo society and its economy. As the Oyo Empire grew, stretching its influence far and wide, so did the worship and, surprisingly, the commercial opportunities surrounding its powerful deities. Imagine caravans setting out from the bustling city, laden with goods, but also carrying something far more intangible, yet equally potent, Sango's thunder, following them like a traveling banner, a symbol of power and presence. This wasn't just about faith anymore. It was about enterprise, innovation, and an ingenious way of integrating the divine into daily commerce. It's a story of how devotion, belief, and even fear could be packaged, sold, and become a cornerstone of an empire's growth. Now, this is where things get really interesting. The priests of Sango, astute observers of human nature and belief, began to realize something profound. Devotion wasn't just a personal feeling, it could be a marketable commodity. They discovered that faith, in its purest form, could be packaged and offered in tangible ways. Think about it, who wouldn't want a little divine protection in a world full of uncertainties? So, they started crafting and selling charms, each with a specific purpose. Need safe passage on a long journey through unknown lands. There was a charm for that. Facing a difficult court dispute and hoping for justice to swing your way, a special talisman could be acquired. And perhaps one of the most intriguing items was a bracelet woven with distinctive lightning marks, said to make the wearer immune to lies. How incredible is that? Suddenly, the very power of thunder, the awe-inspiring force of the sky, had a price tag. It transformed from an abstract spiritual concept into a practical, everyday item, readily available to anyone who could afford it. Asterisk, asterisk. These weren't just ordinary markets anymore. Places that were once solely filled with the earthy smells of yams, the rich aroma of palm oil, and the chatter of trade for basic necessities now buzzed with something new: divine insurance. It was a spiritual marketplace, thriving right alongside the material one. You'd see women expertly selling bracelets carved from charred wood, remnants, they'd claim, of trees struck by Sango's very own lightning. Imagine the stories that went with those. And across the market, men would loudly hawk miniature axes, meticulously blessed in Sango's name, proudly declaring their ability to cut down any curse or ward off evil. And the people bought them. Why? Because in a world where the elements were powerful, where life could be unpredictable, who wouldn't pay for a peace of mind, a sense of security, or a belief that they could stay safe from the overwhelming power of the sky? This wasn't just superstition. It was a deeply ingrained worldview, and these items offered a tangible connection to the divine. The influence of Sango's thunderous trade extended even to the Empire's formidable warriors. Before heading into battle, facing uncertain fates, they would queue not just for weapons, but for spiritual fortification. They'd D-line up to pay for the priest's thunder oil, a special mixture of palm kernel and ashes, carefully prepared and then rubbed across their chests. This ritual wasn't just symbolic. It was believed to offer a powerful layer of protection against harm, ensuring Sango's favor in the impending conflict. And before riding out, in a spectacular display of faith and intimidation, they would strike their shields with iron rods, mimicking the fearsome echo of thunder. It was more than just a ritual. It was a powerful spectacle, a blend of deep-seated faith and theatrical display designed to rally their own spirits and perhaps to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. Asterisk, asterisk. It was during this time that the priests, with their keen understanding of human psychology and the natural world, realized something quietly profound. Fear, when properly channeled, could be incredibly profitable. Every storm that darkened the Oyo sky, every rumble of thunder, every flash of lightning, became more than just a weather event. It transformed into a campaign, an opportunity to reinforce the power of Sango and, by extension, the need for his protective charms. Similarly, every drought, a period of hardship and uncertainty, became a business opportunity, driving people to seek divine intervention and assurance. The more uncertain the weather, the more precarious life felt, the more people flocked to the shrines, seeking reassurance, protection, and a sense of control through Sango's power. And so, thunder, the raw, untamed power of nature, became the Oyo Empire's loudest and most compelling advertisement, an undeniable force driving both faith and fortune. Asterisk, asterisk. But, as we all know, trade, with its relentless pursuit of profit and its competitive spirit, changes all things, even the very nature of religious belief and the perception of gods. Soon enough, the markets became saturated, and merchants began competing fiercely to sell the most authentic Sango relics. The line between genuine spiritual artifacts and mere commercial goods blurred. You'd find fake thunderstones, cleverly disguised river pebbles, filling the market stalls, polished to look ancient and powerful. Some vendors, with a wink and a whisper, would claim that their charms had been kissed by lightning itself, imbued with divine power, when in truth they had simply been blackened by fire, soot mimicking the scorch of a bolt. Yet people continued to buy them. Why? Because, at its core, belief, especially in times of uncertainty, wasn't always about absolute truth. It was, and often still is, about comfort, about hope, about the deep-seated human need for reassurance and a connection to something greater than themselves. As the profits from this divine enterprise soared, the very appearance and atmosphere of the Sango temples began to change dramatically. What might have once been simpler, more rustic places of worship transformed into opulent sanctuaries. Gold and intricate ivory carvings started to line the altars, reflecting the growing wealth and influence of the priesthood. The Thunder Priests themselves, once perhaps humble servants, began to walk with the bearing of chiefs. Their traditional beads became heavier, more elaborate, signifying their elevated status. Their words, once perhaps purely spiritual pronouncements, grew sharper, infused with newfound authority and power. They no longer simply waited for the storms to arrive, observing and interpreting Sangos' will. Now, they claimed to command them, asserting a direct control over the very forces of nature they represented. It was a stunning transformation, showcasing how material prosperity could reshape spiritual authority. Asterisk, asterisk. And as these powerful merchants of thunder looked out across the horizon, they weren't just seeing changing weather patterns or the natural ebb and flow of the seasons. They weren't simply observing clouds gathering for rain. No, what they saw, with an almost uncanny clarity, were customers. Every brewing storm wasn't just a meteorological event. It was an opportunity. Every rumble of distant thunder wasn't just the sound of nature, it was the call of potential profit. They had successfully woven the awe of the divine into the fabric of commerce, creating an empire where faith and fortune walked hand in hand. The story of Sango in the Oyo Empire is a powerful testament to human ingenuity, belief, and the remarkable ways societies adapt and thrive, finding opportunity even in the thunderous embrace of their gods. What a fascinating journey through history and belief. You see, as we discussed, the world was changing. Power wasn't just in the temples anymore. It was in the markets, in trade, in wealth. And with this shift, the Sango priests, those guardians of divine justice, began to change too. Their sacred duty, once so pure, started to twist into something darker. The very acts of justice, that powerful symbol meant only for truth and righteousness, began to swing for profit, for personal gain, and even for revenge. It's a classic tale, isn't it? When absolute power is unchecked, things can go awry. Let me paint you a picture. Some priests started carrying these miniature thunder axes, not the grand ceremonial ones, but smaller, personal ones made of bronze and copper, inscribed with what they claimed were curses. And here's the kicker, they told people that if they pointed this axe at a liar, lightning would strike that person within 7 days. Can you imagine the fear that would instill? At first, it was probably just a performance, a dramatic way to scare off the truly wicked, to keep order in a world that was becoming increasingly complex. But here's the thing about fear. It's incredibly easy to abuse. Once you have that power over people's deepest anxieties, the temptation can be immense. And abuse it they did. Soon, disputes that should have gone straight to the Alafin's royal court, the traditional seat of justice, were being settled in hushed tones, in the back rooms of these very shrines. It became a marketplace for divine intervention. A few coins, discreetly placed beneath the altar, could suddenly silence the supposed thunder, or far more nefariously, make it roar against your enemies. Imagine that. Merchants, desperate for an edge in the cutthroat world of trade, would pay priests to call storms on rival trade routes. This wasn't about divine will anymore. It was about manipulating the elements, or at least the asterisk belief asterisk in their manipulation, to gain a financial advantage. Caravans would be delayed, goods destroyed, profits diverted. It was a kind of divine warfare, invisible to the eye, incredibly profitable for those orchestrating it, and utterly devastating for those on the receiving end. Even the royal palace, the very heart of the kingdom, began to grow wary. The Olafin's most trusted advisors whispered amongst themselves, their voices laced with concern. They observed that these thunder priests, once pillars of the community, were becoming too powerful, too independent for comfort. They no longer waited for the royal summons to adjudicate. Instead, they started issuing judgments of their own, claiming divine impulse as their justification. This was a direct challenge to the established order, a blurring of the lines between spiritual authority and temporal power. It was a dangerous game they were playing. But, as with any fire, especially one stolen from the gods, there was a price to pay for wielding it for personal gain. The more these priests used their supposed divine connection for selfish purposes, the less it actually answered their call. It's almost poetic, isn't it? Some priests, in their quiet moments, began to notice something chilling. The storms no longer came when they prayed with conviction. The skies, once so responsive to their pleas and threats, grew quiet again. Not out of wrath, perhaps, but something far worse, indifference. The divine connection was fading. Still, they were masters of spectacle, and they were too deeply invested to admit the truth. In public, they would still shout their prayers, strike the earth with their axes, demanding the thunder respond, putting on a powerful show for the believers. But in private, it was a different story. They would drink palm wine, their faces flushed, and laugh. They would laugh about the fools who still believed, the gullible masses who bought into their charades. The sacred had been completely twisted, transformed into a mere spectacle, and that spectacle, that performance, had become their very means of survival, their way of maintaining power and status. And through it all, what about the people? The common folk continued to buy charms, believing they could purchase protection from the heavens, that a few coins could ward off the very storms the priests themselves might be conjuring. They didn't realize they were only feeding the very fire that would one day consume them all. They were caught in a web of deceit, their faith exploited, their resources drained, all to prop up a system that had lost its way. The axe of Sango, once a shining symbol of divine balance, a tool for cutting through lies and enforcing righteous justice, had tragically become a blade with two edges. One edge was still capable of cutting through deceit, yes, but the other, far more insidious edge, was carving deeper and deeper into the hearts of men, fueling greed and corruption. It's a powerful lesson about the nature of power itself, and how easily it can corrupt even the most sacred of duties. Every empire that forgets balance eventually calls its own storm. The rebellion began not in the grand halls of Oyabor, but in the quiet villages that had grown weary of thunder without mercy. Imagine the parched earth, the endless wait for a sign, and instead only the booming echo of Sango's power. In one such place, nestled near the life-giving river Ocean, a new kind of priesthood began to emerge. The Rainmakers, they dared to whisper what many felt in their hearts, that Sango's priests had lost their way. They claimed that thunder without rain, without renewal, was not justice, but cruelty. Where the established thunder priests sold fear, the Rainmakers offered something different, something deeply human, the promise of renewal. Their shrines were simpler, adorned with offerings of water and green leaves. Their prayers were softer, almost like a gentle rain themselves, and their message, crystal clear, like a freshly washed sky: let water follow thunder again. Let life return to the land. Picture this: the early morning mist clinging to a riverside village, the air thick with tension. On one side, the thunder priests, in their vibrant regalia, chanting ancient hymns, their voices powerful, demanding. On the other, the Rainmakers, in humble attire, their chants a low, steady hum, promising solace. Villagers watched, their faces a mix of hope and fear, clutching small charms, as a sudden, dramatic lightning bolt split the sky overhead. The people were deeply divided. Some, out of long-standing loyalty or terror, stayed true to Sango's fiery power. They believed in the old ways, in the might that had always protected them. But many, driven by the desperation of unending drought, turned their hopeful gaze towards the Rainmakers. They truly believed that only these new priests could heal the land, could bring the much-needed blessing of the rains. Before long, this spiritual divide tragically curdled into violent conflict. Sango's priests, feeling their authority challenged and their traditions threatened, vehemently accused the Rainmakers of heresy, of blasphemy against the mighty Sango. The Rainmakers, in turn, retaliated with their own fierce accusations, claiming that the Thunder Priests were not true servants of the divine, but rather merchants selling divine wrath for mere coin, exploiting the people's fear for their own gain. Villages, once peaceful hubs of life, began to burn. The very sky became a canvas for this cosmic battle, as thunder and rain, once harmonious forces, now clashed with terrifying fury. It was whispered throughout the land that on certain nights the lightning and the downpour fell together so violently, with such raw, untamed power, that even the ancient rivers seemed to scream, their waters churning in anguish. Each side, in their fervent conviction, declared victory in every storm, interpreting the tumultuous skies as a sign of their god's favor. But beneath this chaotic, fiery display, something far more ancient and profound was beginning to unravel in the hearts and minds of the people. They slowly, painfully, began to see what they had once been blind to. They started to question. They began to realize that perhaps gods, even the most powerful, could be used as tools by those who claimed to speak for them. They saw that faith itself, that sacred bond, could be bent and twisted, like iron in a blacksmith's fire, shaped not by divine will, but by human ambition and power struggles. As this devastating war of priests dragged on, the land itself bore the cruel brunt of their conflict. Famine spread its gaunt shadow across the fields, claiming lives and hope. Once bustling trade routes fell silent, becoming dangerous, desolate paths. Shrines, once hallowed places of worship and community, were abandoned, left to decay, their sacred fires extinguished. The mighty empire of Oyo, once so proud and unyielding, began to tremble. Not from the thunder of Sango, but from a far more insidious and dangerous force, doubt. And then came that fateful night. A storm, unlike any other, broke over the very heart of the empire. The city of Oyo, as lightning cracked and rain lashed down. Both sides, the thunder priests and the rainmakers, desperate for a sign, ran to their rooftops, their faces upturned, eagerly trying to claim the storm as proof of their god's ultimate power. But the lightning, with a cruel, indifferent justice, struck neither temple. It bypassed the sacred places of both factions. Instead, with a blinding flash, it struck the grand palace itself, the seat of earthly power. In that single, terrifying flash of light, the people finally profoundly understood. The revelation was stark, undeniable. The gods, they realized, were not angry with them. No, the gods were simply tired. Tired of being wielded as weapons. Tired of their names being invoked for human conflict. From that moment, the storm, once a terrifying and revered entity, lost its most fervent worshippers. The deep-seated fear that had long compelled devotion began to recede. People, with a new kind of resilience, began to pray less to the heavens and to trade more amongst themselves. They started to build their roofs stronger, not out of fear of divine wrath, but out of a practical understanding of shelter. They learned a crucial lesson, that protection, true and lasting, sometimes comes not from distant gods or their feuding priests, but from one's own hands, from community, from self-reliance. And so, the thunder that had once ruled men's hearts, the terrifying voice of divine power, slowly but surely, became just weather again. No longer divine, no longer sacred, no longer a weapon in a priestly war. It was simply the sound of balance, remembering how to breathe, reminding everyone that even the most powerful forces eventually return to their natural state. All right, let's dive into the powerful story of a fallen empire. This one is going to give you chills. Imagine this: Oyo's mighty walls, once glistening with royal processions and sacred chants, now stand cracked beneath a quiet, desolate sky. The very drums that had called Sango's fire, that had echoed with the power of lightning itself, fell silent. Now, only the wind moves through those empty courtyards. A mournful whisper carrying the ghosts of oaths once sworn in the thunder god's name. It's a stark picture, isn't it? A testament to how quickly power can shift, how icily the mighty can fall. The Thunder Priests, these formidable figures who were once the kings of the storm, the very conduits of Sango's immense power, now found themselves fleeing their own shadows. Their authority, once seemingly untouchable, had, in a cruel twist of fate, turned against them. Can you imagine the terror? The people, the common folk who once knelt in awe before their vibrant shrines, now hurled stones at their doors, their reverence replaced by fear and resentment. The gleaming axe heads, powerful symbols of justice and divine might, were hastily buried deep in the ground, hidden from the prying eyes of colonial soldiers who arrived not with ancient wisdom, but with crosses and guns, bringing with them a completely different kind of power. This wasn't just a physical conquest. It was a spiritual invasion, a clash of worlds. When these colonial forces marched inland, their approach wasn't one of reverence or understanding. Oh no, they came with what they called reason. They dismissed Sango, the magnificent thunder god, as nothing more than a crude superstition. His powerful priests, they labeled them witch doctors, and the profound ancient rituals that had bound this society for centuries, they were cast aside as barbarism. In their carefully penned journals, these foreign observers wrote of cleansing the land of heathen fire, a chilling phrase that speaks volumes about their intentions. And yet, here's the irony, here's the incredible twist. Even as they mocked the thunder, even as they sought to dismantle its power, they feared it. Oh, they absolutely feared it. Every single time lightning split the sky above their newly erected forts, you can bet they crossed themselves, whispering frantic prayers in trembling, uncertain voices. Their reason crumbled in the face of nature's raw power, the very power they sought to extinguish. It's a reminder that some forces are too primal, too deeply rooted, to ever truly be forgotten or dismissed. The echoes of Sango's thunder still rattled their colonial composure. But fear, no matter what language it's spoken in, is still fear. And this fear ultimately led to destructive action. The British administrators, driven by their own anxieties and desire for control, issued orders for the sacred shrines to be destroyed. Imagine the heartbreak, the utter devastation. The beautiful brass axes, once revered symbols of Sango's might, were brutally confiscated, not just taken, but shipped away, like mere curiosities, across oceans to museums in London and Lisbon. There, they were coldly labeled as fetish relics of the Yoruba storm god, stripped of their spiritual significance, reduced to anthropological specimens. And the altars, those sacred spaces once vibrant red with palm oil offerings, were brutally doused in kerosene and set ablaze. They burned until nothing remained but ash and a profound, echoing silence. It wasn't just buildings they were destroying. It was a spiritual heart, a cultural legacy, being deliberately and systematically obliterated. The smell of smoke and desecration lingered in the air, a heavy shroud over the land. Despite this brutal suppression, the spirit of Sango was not so easily extinguished. In the remote villages, the last remaining priests, with incredible bravery and ingenuity, had to disguise their profound faith as mere folklore. They sang Sango's praises, not openly, but hidden within everyday work songs, carefully pretending the ancient thunder chants were simply rhythms for pounding yam, a mundane, domestic task. Mothers filled with a fierce determination to keep their heritage alive secretly hid small thunder charms beneath their children's pillows, whispering comforting lies that they would keep nightmares away, when in truth they were safeguarding a connection to their ancestral gods. It was a beautiful act of defiance, a quiet rebellion of the spirit. Even stripped of its magnificent temples, even without the grand rituals, the fire of Sango lived on. It survived in the hushed songs, in the deep-seated fear that still lingered in the hearts of the colonizers, and most importantly, in the unyielding memory of a people. The empire trembled and ultimately fell, not because of the thunder's wrath, as many might believe. No, it trembled because it had forgotten what thunder truly meant. It forgot that thunder isn't just about raw power, it's about balance. It's about the intricate harmony between earth and sky, between humans and the divine. Without that crucial understanding, without that sacred balance, society started to unravel. Men sold their moral authority for personal greed, nations traded their deepest faith for fleeting gold, and most tragically, the world seemed poised to sell even its gods, its most sacred beliefs, for sterile history books, reducing living deities to mere footnotes. It's a poignant lesson about what happens when we lose touch with the spiritual core of our existence. This story of Oyo, of Sango and his priests, isn't just ancient history. It's a powerful echo of struggles that continue today. The clash of cultures, the fight to preserve heritage, and the enduring human spirit that finds ways to keep belief alive, even in the darkest of times. It reminds us that true power isn't about dominance, but about understanding, respect, and balance. All right, let's dive into the powerful journey of Sango across the Atlantic. This is going to be an incredible story. But here's the thing about thunder. You can try to bury it, you can try to silence it, but its echo finds new mountains, new tongues, new names. It simply cannot be contained. This truth became profoundly clear when enslaved Yoruba men and women were brutally forced across the Atlantic. They weren't allowed to carry their physical idols or their sacred objects. The colonizers stripped them of nearly everything. But what they couldn't strip away was Sango, carried not in their hands, but deeply, vibrantly, in their hearts. The colonizers took their land, their freedom, their very names, but they could not, would not, extinguish their fire. Imagine the scene in the harrowing sugar plantations of Brazil, the bustling streets of Cuba, the vibrant communities of Trinidad, and the resilient spirit of Haiti. They whispered his name in secret. Shango, Sango. It was the same powerful god, the same crackling lightning, but in a world turned upside down. This was a testament to the enduring spirit of faith, a spark kept alive against unimaginable odds. When overseers cruelly whipped the enslaved in the scorching sugar plantations of Bahia, local law says thunder often rolled in the distance, as if the very sky itself protested the injustice. It was Sango speaking through the heavens, and in the cramped, often desperate rooms of Havana and Port of Spain, the faithful, with incredible ingenuity and unwavering devotion, began to rebuild his temples, not with grand structures, but from memory, from faith. 4 simple walls, a bowl holding a flickering flame, and a song, the rhythm of Africa carried within their souls, became the very heartbeat of their survival, a quiet, powerful defiance against erasure. The Europeans, in their ignorance and arrogance, saw only exotic dances and primitive drums. They dismissed these sacred acts as mere entertainment or superstition, but they were deeply, profoundly mistaken. Behind every intricate step, every communal dance, there was a profound act of resistance. Every single beat of the drum was a hidden prayer, a fervent plea. Let the fire not die. Let our spirit not be extinguished. It was a language of hope and resilience that transcended spoken words. In these new, harsh lands, Sango, the powerful Orisha, began to change his garments. He adapted. taking on new guises to survive and thrive. He wore the mask of Saint Barbara, who was often depicted with a tower and lightning, or Saint Jerome, whose fierce spirit resonated with Sango's own. His electrifying lightning, once a direct symbol of divine power, was now subtly painted as a sword of righteousness, wielded by a Christian saint. The colonizers, in their quest to dominate and convert, truly believed they had successfully converted the Africans, that they had replaced their ancient beliefs with Christianity. But oh, how wrong they were. In truth, the Africans had masterfully converted Christianity itself to fit their gods, weaving their sacred traditions into the fabric of the new religion. It was a truly masterful deception of faith, a brilliant act of spiritual preservation. The enslaved would pray openly, devoutly, to the saints, performing rituals that seemed outwardly Christian, but secretly, beneath the surface, within the privacy of their hearts and homes, they were praying to the thunder, to the ancient deities that had always been theirs. And when the mighty storms came, as they always did, across the Caribbean and South America, they would say softly, perhaps with a knowing glance or a quiet smile, "Sango is still with us." It was a secret language of hope, a powerful affirmation that their gods, their culture, their very identity could not be erased. In these new lands, Sango's role subtly shifted, expanding beyond his traditional judgment of guilt or innocence. He became the ultimate guardian of endurance, the protector of the unwavering spirit. His mighty thunder, once a sound of raw power, transformed into the very rhythm of their music, a celebration of life and resilience. His intense fire, a symbol of divine energy, became interwoven with their very identity, a burning reminder of who they were and where they came from. Every single lightning strike wasn't just a natural phenomenon. It was a powerful reminder that God's true divine forces cannot truly be colonized. They can only be renamed, reimagined, and gloriously reborn in new forms and new hearts. And though vast, unforgiving oceans separated them from their ancestral homeland, each booming clap of thunder that echoed across the tropical skies still whispered a timeless message in Yoruba. "I am not gone, I am still here. I endure with you." This is the power of faith, the strength of culture, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. Let us look at his fiery reign, his power, and his passion. But what happens to a god of thunder when centuries pass, when kingdoms fall, and the world moves on? Does the fire just die out? Absolutely not. It transforms. It learns. It becomes something quieter, gentler, and dare I say, even wiser. Imagine this. Centuries after his reign, Sango's fire still burns. It's not the same destructive inferno, but a steady, guiding flame. In the heart of Oyo, in the bustling streets of Lagos, even across oceans, in places like Trinidad and the vibrant lands of Bahia, the cult of Sango lives on. But the drums, they no longer beat for war. Oh no, they beat for remembrance. They echo with history, with stories, and with the deep, resonant rhythm of ancestry. The priests, they're not wielding thunder as a weapon of judgment anymore. Instead, they hold it up like a mirror, reflecting back to humanity that delicate balance we all seek. The balance between immense power and genuine humility. It's a powerful lesson, isn't it? Picture a sunny day, maybe an open-air festival in a Yoruba town. Kids are running around, their laughter bubbling up like a spring. They're dancing around effigies of the old god, their little toy axes playfully raised to the sky. For them, thunder isn't a punishment. It's a song, a rhythm. It's a beat that's older than any king, older than any fear we've ever known. It's pure joy and connection. And as the sun begins to set, casting long, golden shadows across the village, you might catch a glimpse of an old priest. He's smiling softly as a gentle rain begins to fall, almost as if the sky itself is weeping tears of remembrance. And far off, in the distance, a flicker of lightning dances in the clouds, not menacing, but almost like a playful wink from the heavens. It's a beautiful, peaceful scene. This modern Sango priest, he doesn't wear the fierce red of battle. He's often cloaked in serene white. His call isn't for destruction, it's for clarity, for understanding. He teaches us that power should never, ever be worshipped. It should only be respected. It's a tool, a force, something to be channeled wisely. He'll tell you that every single storm, every rumble in the sky, is a powerful reminder. A reminder to pause, to breathe, and to check ourselves before pride, unchecked and arrogant, becomes a destructive lightning strike. It's about channeling that energy, not letting it consume you. And it's not just in Nigeria. This incredible legacy has traveled far and wide. In the vibrant Caribbean, the name Sango still resonates with every single drumbeat, vibrating through the air, connecting generations. In the mystical lands of Bahia, Brazil, the temples of Shong still light candles, especially before a storm. It's a way of honoring, of connecting with that primal energy. And right there, back in Nigeria, when thunder cracks dramatically over the vast savannah, you'll hear the elders murmur softly, almost reverently. The King of Fire is speaking. It's not a cry of terror, but a recognition, a deep understanding of the forces that shape their world. You can almost visualize it. Afro-Brazilian devotees, adorned in white, swaying in rhythmic trance to the insistent beat of the drums. The sky above them is a canvas of drama, thunderclouds glowing an intense orange as the sun dips below the horizon. And there, a priest, with a profound sense of reverence, lifts an axe towards the stormy sky, not in defiance, but in acknowledgement. In communion with the mighty Shong, it's a powerful, almost cinematic scene that speaks volumes about the enduring spirit of this ancient deity. Perhaps, truly, this is how it was always meant to be. The fire that once ruled men, that commanded fear and demanded absolute obedience, now gently humbles them. It reminds us of our place in the grand scheme of things. The God that once punished with swift, fiery justice now protects, offering wisdom and guidance. And somewhere, deep within the heartbeat of the continent, you can almost hear Sango's laughter still echoing between the clouds. But it's not a laugh of rage or fury anymore. It's a laugh of reminder, a gentle nudge. It reminds us that balance never truly dies. It simply learns new ways, beautiful new ways, to return. It adapts, it evolves, it finds its path back to us, constantly seeking equilibrium. So, the next time the sky rumbles tonight, when you hear that deep, resonant boom, don't immediately think of anger. Think of memory. Think of the echo of a powerful God, reminding all of us that lightning, much like truth itself, always, always finds its way home. It's a powerful thought to carry with you. Let us conclude in our powerful exploration of Sango, the thunder god, and what his story still teaches us. It's been an incredible journey, and as we reach our final chapter, you might notice something shifting, even in the air around you. The rain begins softly now, not as a storm, but as a whisper, a gentle caress after a tumultuous downpour. You can almost feel the earth breathe again, a deep, cleansing sigh, where once the thunder ruled with fear, reverberating through the very ground. Now it hums with memory, a distant, lingering echo. The ancient stones that once trembled under Sango's mighty feet are quiet now, settled and still. But if you listen very, very closely, truly attune your ears, You might still catch a heartbeat in the clouds, a rhythm that speaks of timeless truths. You see, once upon a time, people across the land, from the bustling markets of Oyo to the quiet villages nestled in the hills, feared the sound of thunder. They interpreted it as the voice of punishment, a divine decree against wrongdoing. But those who learned to listen, really listen, with an open heart and a curious spirit, they knew something deeper. They understood it was also the sound of truth being spoken, resonating in a language only the honest, the pure of heart, could truly hear and comprehend. Every single flash of lightning, starkly illuminating the darkened landscape, served as a powerful, undeniable reminder that balance, in all things, is exquisitely fragile. And justice, much like the life-giving rain, must ultimately fall on both the guilty and the innocent alike, ensuring equity and sustenance, lest the very earth itself crack and wither from thirst, unable to sustain life. In the rich tapestry of stories woven in old Oyo, Sango was never just a god of wrath, a deity of pure destruction. Or no, he was something far more profound. He was a mirror, a shimmering reflection held up to humanity, showing people the intricate, often turbulent storms they carried within themselves, the inner conflicts, the passions, the unchecked desires. To choose to follow him, to walk his path, was to undertake a profound spiritual journey. It meant learning to stand precisely between immense power and disciplined restraint, to hold the hottest fire without succumbing to its burning, to speak your deepest truth, your absolute conviction, even when the entire world around you trembled, shaken to its very core. It was a path of fierce honesty and self-mastery. And maybe, just maybe, that's what thunder has always tried to tell us, what its rumbling voice has been trying to convey through millennia. That justice isn't the deafening noise of the storm itself, the destructive force, but rather the profound, purifying calm that inevitably follows it. It's the peace after the cleansing. That destruction and creation, seemingly opposing forces, are not enemies but brothers, forever wrestling and dancing in the vast, unending theater of the sky, each giving way to the other in an eternal cycle. But then, as history unfolded, the colonial winds began to sweep fiercely through the land. They brought with them new beliefs, new ways of thinking, and a deliberate attempt to silence this ancient thunder. They dismissed it as mere witchcraft, demonized its sacred rituals, and tried to bury it beneath the grand, imposing structures of foreign hymns and cold marble cathedrals. They sought to erase its memory, to sever the people from their ancestral roots. But you cannot cage the sky. You cannot silence the very essence of truth. Sango's voice, though suppressed in its homeland, simply found new pathways. It traveled, carried by the currents of migration and resilience, across the vast, unforgiving sea, across generations of displacement and struggle, until it found new drums beating in foreign lands, new tongues eager to speak his name, new bodies ready to dance in his ancient spirit. Today, in the vibrant, sun-drenched hills of Bahia, deep within Brazil's spiritual heart, in the bustling backyards of Trinidad, where rhythms pulsate with life, and in the quiet, revered compounds of Ibadan, nestled in Nigeria, his name still moves like palpable heat in the air. It has changed its spelling, yes, adapted to new languages and cultures. Its rhythm might have shifted, its accent acquired new inflections, but never, ever has its essence been lost. Because thunder, dear friends, doesn't truly die. It only changes its silence, waiting for the opportune moment, for the right voice to make itself heard once more. It transforms, adapts, and endures. So today, when you hear the rumble of thunder, you might not immediately think of Sango, the ancient Yoruba deity. You might, quite naturally, think of meteorology, weather reports, the practical science of electricity, or the physics of atmospheric discharge. But behind all that, beneath the modern understanding, deep within the old, primal pulse of the earth, his fundamental lesson still echoes, reverberating through time, that truth, much like thunder, does not ask for permission to be heard. It doesn't politely wait for an invitation. It arrives when it must, bursting forth with undeniable force, even if its arrival startles the entire world awake, forcing us to confront realities we might prefer to ignore. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's precisely why the world still needs its storms. Why these powerful disruptions are essential. Because without the rumbling presence of thunder, we would collectively forget that silence itself can lie, that quiet can be a deceptive mask. Without the piercing flash of lightning, we would easily forget that darkness, however comforting it may seem, can cunningly deceive us, obscuring vital truths. And without Sango, without the profound wisdom embedded in his story, we might dangerously forget that power, no matter how immense or absolute, must always, always kneel before the sacred principle of balance. Somewhere tonight, under a vast, restless African sky, filled with anticipation, a priest, robed in pristine white, raises his arms not to command the magnificent clouds, not to demand their obedience, but simply to greet them, to honor their ancient power. Children, oblivious to the deeper meanings, laugh with uninhibited joy as lightning dances spectacularly across the distant horizon, painting fleeting masterpieces in the night sky. And in their innocent laughter, if you truly attune yourself, you can almost hear the old resonant drums of Oyo beating once more, a timeless rhythm connecting past, present, and future. It is a powerful reminder, a profound truth etched into the very fabric of existence, that fire, while possessing the fearsome power to destroy, also holds the sacred capacity to light the way, to illuminate paths, and bring warmth. That justice, when stripped of mercy, when administered without compassion, is merely another storm, another destructive force. And with that, dear listener, I bid you good night. You are now under Baobab skies.